Okay, so today we are going to be looking at the 3 artists we have learned about so far. Please open up your sketchbook to pages 29 and 30. At this point, please also have something that you are going to write with, a pencil or a pen. So looking at page 29 in your sketchbook, there are 3 columns. Okay, the first column says O'Keeffe, the second one Seurat, and the third one Van Gogh. Here's our first step. What I need you to do, go ahead and look down, is to take your pencil and draw a line, not quite halfway down. Okay, not quite halfway down, separating the top from the bottom in each of the first columns. This is where we're going to be taking notes over these 3 artists. In the top sections, these are going to be our primary resources. Your primary resource is your first-hand experience, something you know about and you can do. Our bigger section is going to be our secondary resource. Your secondary resource is stuff you have to learn about. So maybe you read about something, or maybe a person tells you, but you didn't actually do it firsthand. Pause your video. So we're going to examine our primary resources first. Primary resource is something that you know because you've done it or it has to do with your life. So when we look at Georgia O'Keeffe, that's the one we did with the watercolor. Okay, you already did some watercolor. So we can comment not about her, we've not met her, okay, but we could comment about her work or how she did her work, how she did watercolor. What could you, boys and girls, say you learned from doing watercolor?
A color change in it.
Okay, so you noticed that with O'Keeffe's work, you know how to do a color change with watercolor paint. Is there something else besides just a color change?
Water control or paint control.
Good. So we learned with watercolor paint to do paint control, color change, and value change, and that's something she did too. So in your notes for O'Keeffe, we can put watercolor, and we can say paint control, because she had great paint control, and then she did color and value change. Now you know that because you did it and she did it. Okay, at this point, I'd like for you to please think about Seurat and his pointillism and what you actually did in his style, and you could comment on pointillism here. And then think about Van Gogh's impasto paint, that thick chunky paint, and how you did it, and you could put it here. And that will finish your primary resources. Okay, so for this next part of our work, we have already listed everything that we know from firsthand experience. That's our primary resources. Things you know because you've done them. You've done watercolor. We didn't do oil paint, but we did do the pointillism like Seurat, experimenting with value change, dots getting closer together and further apart. And we experimented with the impasto paint, which is paint mixed with wax and sand. We didn't do the glass. And we know that that paint is thick, it's chunky, and we want streaky brush strokes. So this is, again, all primary resources. You know it, you did it. we are moving to our second type of gathering information, and this is a secondary resource. A secondary resource is something you don't know firsthand, but it's told to you, or you see it, or it's read to you, or you read about it. So from this point on, we are going to go to Canvas, and it's linked right here on the calendar, and it says 3 artists' biographies. OK, which is O'Keeffe, VG, Van Gogh, and S, Seurat. You're going to click this, and it's going to open up this link. Please pause until you do that. And now, here's our next step. We're going to be reading the biography. A biography is a story about an artist's life. If you know how to do this, you can use a highlighter tool to indicate important facts. However, what we are going to do together is we are going to write important facts over here in the space for secondary information. And if we run out of room, we'll just continue it down in here. That is fine. So we're looking for important details. Important facts may include things like the year that they were born, when they died, what they're known for, how the public reacted to their work, and maybe where they were when they did their stuff, or if they have any famous paintings. There may be things in these biographies that are more just minor details, things we don't really care about, like how many brothers or sisters they had. Maybe it'll say what their favorite food was, who they married. These are all kind of second examples. We don't really care about this stuff. It's just more fun. So we're looking more for the important facts. So we're going to start by looking at Vincent van Gogh, and we're going to be taking our notes right here. Get ready with a pencil. I'm going to start us off by looking at the first few paragraphs together and trying to help us decide if it's important or just kind of interesting. If after this time you're like, oh, I can do the rest on my own, then that is super. You go for it. If you need some guidance, you're going to watch the next couple videos and I'll guide you through all of them. So Vincent van Gogh. Where did Vincent van Gogh grow up? Vincent van Gogh was born March 30th, 1853 in the Netherlands. This is near Germany. Okay, so at that point, that may be important. Maybe not so much the March 30th. If you were born in March, maybe you're like, oh, he was born around me. Okay, but this part, 1853, so it's over 100 years ago in the Netherlands. So I'm going to come over here to my notes, and I'm in Van Gogh section, and I'm going to put, not full sentences, of course. I'm not wasting my time with that. I'll put a little B, and I'll put, because that's born, 1853. Maybe I want to write Netherlands. Okay, but that's it. We're not writing a whole lot. You don't need to write a whole lot. If you write a whole lot, it's more tempting to just copy from your notes, and it's called plagiarism. If you just write little notes, like quick notes, then you're not plagiarizing, you're just writing your own stuff. Okay, so here we go. His father and grandfather, here's where we are, were both Methodist ministers, pastors of a Christian church. Vincent had 2 brothers and 3 sisters. Probably not important to his life, so we're just going to keep reading. He was closest to his youngest brother, Theo. Although he enjoyed drawing from the time he was a young boy, Vincent had a number of other jobs before he decided to become a full-time artist. He worked as a teacher in London, trained to be a minister. He also worked in a bookstore, an art gallery, a missionary. Around the time of 27, he decided to become a full-time oil painter. Oil paint is a mix of like color and oil. So I don't know how much of that's important, but we may want to say he came to art late, or art was his second job, like around he was 27. Okay, so down here, I'm going to put I'm going to make another bullet here. He had lots of jobs. I'm going to say started painting. PTG, I'm going to say is painting. Let's see, he said age 37. Or 27 rather, sorry. Age 27. Okay, so just nice and quick. Let's see what's next. Vincent first started painting pictures of poor, hardworking people. Remember, this could have been during that time when he was training to be a minister. His most famous work during that time was titled The Potato Eaters. The people in the painting were a family he lived with, helping them plow their fields, tend their home, and fix their tools. So we could write something about the potato eaters. Letters to his brother. Much of what we know about Van Gogh comes from the letters he wrote to his brother Theo. Theo worked in an art gallery in Paris and supported Vincent's art career. And so you may be thinking, well, how did he support it? Well, he sent Vincent money every month, and he encouraged him. Theo tried to sell Vincent's paintings, but nobody wanted to buy them. Okay, so maybe out of all that, I just say, he had the potato eaters, which is one of his first paintings. And I'm going to underline it because it's a title of a painting. Okay, at this point, if you think you understand how to read, take out important information, and record it where you need to record it in your sketchbook, then go ahead and stop, and you don't have to do any of the rest of this video. If, though, this is helping you to try to get the information, will you come along and follow the rest? Okay, so make your decision. Your end goal here is you will need to jot down the secondary information about O'Keeffe, Seurat, and Van Gogh by looking at this resource that I have put on here for you onto Canvas. Okay, so either decide I'm done with the video and I'm going to keep going all on my own, or continue with the video. Well, you have chosen to continue listening to my lovely voice. I'm happy to help. All right, here's the next. Years in Paris. In 1886, so we're still well over 100 years ago, Vincent moved to Paris, and we know that that's in France. During this time, Van Gogh began to use brighter colors, and he was excited to paint the landscapes and many people he saw in Paris. When he couldn't find models, he'd paint himself for practice. He painted over 20 self-portraits during that time. All of his work was realistic. You could tell what it was. Okay, so at that point, I think I'm going to go. He worked in Paris. And his work was realistic. And if you think of other things that you think are important, please add them. I'm just kind of going frugally. I'm adding just a couple things here. Okay, he began to paint so much that he would run out of paint before his brother could send him money to buy more. It was then that Vincent created his own type of paint called impasto. To make his paints last longer, he mixed wax and sand in. This gave him more paint, but it also thickened the paint. Okay, so we know that that's important. We already know that Van Gogh is important for impasto paint, and we already listed it up here. So if you want to list it down here, okay, that's fine. But we already know that it's super important to Van Gogh. Vincent's paintings were rather small in size, about 2 feet by 2.5 feet. That's the length of one of your arms. His largest paintings were both the size of your arm spread out, just about 4 to 5 feet in width. Okay, and here's a picture of Van Gogh. He's got quite the red hair going on. Or remember, he liked to invent colors that weren't really there, so it could be that he's not redheaded. Van Gogh painted with emotion, and he had a lot of emotion, more than the average person. He bounced between super joyful and unhappy thoughts. Today, we might call that manic depressive or manic depression. You're extremely super happy one minute, but then dangerously very, very low and sad the next. He painted quickly and would sometimes apply the paint directly onto the canvas from the tubes, leaving the paint thick and rough with brushstrokes. Sometimes it would take weeks for his paintings to dry because the paint was so thick. Vincent painted hundreds of pictures during his time, sometimes painting 3 things in a single day. Okay, so I would say over here. I would say he had lots of emotions. And I think that's going to lead to something else. We already know what it's going to lead to. So I'm going to leave it like this, okay? And I'd say he painted a lot. Some folks only paint like 11 or 13 things. I think it was Donatello maybe. No, not Donatello. Raphael maybe? That only painted like 11 things in his entire life. Van Gogh painted hundreds. Hundreds of works. I don't know if you can hear my dogs. They're all outside barking. Okay, so we know that this emotion thing is going to lead to something else. But we didn't read it yet, so we can't put it down on our notes. We know that he painted hundreds of things. That's probably important. Here we go. Mental hospital. Probably that emotional thing. We'll see. In 1889, Van Gogh committed himself to a mental hospital. He could barely take care of himself. He still continued to paint, and he painted one of his most famous works, The Starry Night. Keep in mind it's underlined because it's a title. He painted that while he was looking out the window of his hospital room. Many of his paintings during this time featured cypress trees and a lot of swirling colors. Okay, so before I read this, we know that this is important. We know that his emotions led to bad mental health. Oops, I ran out of room for my L. Mental health. We know he did Potato Eaters and Starry Night. Those are both famous works. Okay. Now, I have linked a video for you here. This is a show. It's called Doctor Who. It's a time-traveling show, so it's fake. It's not actually Van Gogh, but it is a character pretending to be Van Gogh, okay, portrayed as Van Gogh, and Van Gogh goes forward in time to see his paintings in an art gallery. Remember when he died, he thought he was a total failure. Nobody wanted to see his stuff. Nobody bought his stuff. Well, one person did. And he died with great sadness. So this shows Van Gogh seeing what a success he is in the future. Okay, so you don't have to watch this, but it is kind of neat to see. It's very emotional. So if you want to, the link is right there. Okay. Van Gogh was never able to get well. He also struggled with a mental disorder called schizophrenia. This is a medical condition where you hear voices in your head telling you to do things all the time. This would be confusing and frightening. There are medications to help today, but he had nothing to help him. Okay, so remember we have this mental illness over here. He had a lot of emotion. He had bad mental health, and he had schizophrenia. schizophrenia. Okay, which is sometimes called split personality disorder. Okay, but he had nothing to help him. On July 27th, 1890, he had had enough, and he shot himself in the chest or the gut area. He didn't even die right away. He bled for 2 days afterward, and some people say he painted during that time. He must have been in a great deal of pain, and he eventually bled to death in a hospital. He was only 37. So right up here in our notes, we already know when he was born. We can put then he died. Okay, so I'll put a comma there. He died in 1890. And it said he lived to be 37. At any point, if you're like, man, she's going so slow, or this is not helping, remember, you can stop and you can just keep going on your own. If this is helping you, yay, I'm glad to be able to help. And so we're just looking through the notes and trying to figure out what's important. Okay, legacy. Vincent sold only one painting his whole life. He died very poor, and he died feeling like a failure. But today, his paintings sell for millions of dollars. There are over 800 surviving oil paintings and 1,000 watercolors. Ooh, wait a minute. And sketches of his work. Okay, wait a second. So we have over here that he just did oil, but it looks like we can say and, even though we didn't do it in class, he also did watercolor. That may help us when we're trying to compare him to other people. Okay, so there we go. That's something new I didn't know. It's been a long time since I've read this. Okay, legacy. We already read that. Now again using earbuds and headphones. See the Doctor Who. Oh no, okay, I'm sorry. This other one, this is what it was like when he was creating Starry Night. I'm so sorry. This is the one that is so cool to see how he may feel now that his work is successful. Okay, did he really cut off his ear? And you don't have to watch those videos unless you want to. Did he really cut off his ear? Yes. One theory is that, okay, no, wait a minute. Maybe we should write this down because remember, that's kind of weird. So we're writing down interesting things about our artist. Okay, so we know that he cut off his ear. Cut off his ear. Okay. One theory is that after an argument with another artist, Van Gogh went home and cut off part of his left ear with a razor blade. Ooh. Then he wrapped up the ear in a cloth and presented it to a woman as a present. This is the most accepted idea. Other theories include that he cut off his own ear and gave it to a woman to show how devoted he was to her. Another idea is that he and a friend were having a friendly sword fight and cut off the earlobe by mistake, then ran off so he wouldn't get in trouble with the police. Another theory is that the crazy voices in Van Gogh's head told him to do it. Nobody knows for sure. These are all theories or opinions. It is a fact, though, that he's missing part of his ear. Here's other interesting facts about Van Gogh. He would get so obsessed with painting that he often wouldn't eat, and he had poor health as a result. I don't know if you've ever done this. I have done this with art, where I'm just so excited about something and I'm working and working and working. Maybe you're that way about practicing, making shots on a hoop or something. Or you get so obsessed with like a game or watching Netflix or something that you're like, oh, I don't really care to eat. I'm just going to keep going. His brother Theo died 6 months after Vincent and was buried next to him. In some of his self-portraits, his ear is bandaged from when he cut it. It looks like it's his right ear in the pictures because he was using a mirror to paint himself, so everything's in reverse, so it's his left ear. Here are more examples. You can see the choppy lines. This is called Cafe Terrace at night. Choppy, chunky, bright, bold colors. There's that yellow again. The sunflowers and his bedroom. Okay, so now before you read the next one, check your work. Did you write down important facts about Van Gogh's life? And you're going to keep going here. I'm going to pause this video, and if you want to continue with me, I'm very happy to do that. If you don't want to continue with me, go ahead and just read it, and then you're going to start over here with your important facts. Well, you have chosen to continue with me. Here's Georgia O'Keeffe. Where did Georgia O'Keeffe grow up? Georgia O'Keeffe was born in a farmhouse near Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, November 15th, 1887. So right away, we're going to write November 15th, or at least 1887. So I'm not writing the whole thing. We could say she's born in America, because that's different. 1887. 1853. So a little less than 30 years later, she was born. Okay, eventually we know she's going to die, so I'll get ready for that. She spent her youth growing up on a farm with 6 brothers and sisters. Later, when Georgia was a teenager, her family moved to Virginia, so still in America, learning about art. Georgia took private art lessons from a local artist and found that she liked painting with watercolors. Even at the early age of 12, she knew she wanted to become an artist. A passion for art. Although Georgia had a passion for art, it was not easy for a woman to become an artist in the early 1900s. She was often looked down upon and not taken seriously. Remember, because at that time, women should have been in the home. That did not stop Georgia, however. After high school, she attended the Art Institute of Chicago and then the Art Students League in New York. She began as an art teacher, but soon realized that teaching children was not her passion. That's a nice way to put it. She just liked the art part. She really did not enjoy kids. She quit teaching and just focused on her own paintings. She never had children of her own. Whew, that's a lot of stuff. Okay, so we know that she went to art school. She taught for 1 year. And really was just an artist. So, comparatively, remember Van Gogh, he had lots of different jobs. And then he didn't start painting until he was 27. Well, she must have started painting when she was like 20, 21. Okay, pretty young. Okay, because really she was just an artist. No kids. Okay, developing her own style. As Georgia explored art, she began to develop her own unique style. She began to express her emotions and feelings in art. Going back to the basics, Georgia made several charcoal sketches that were some of her first expressions in her new style. Many of her paintings were abstract. She painted nature, so up close that you could not tell exactly what they were. They were more just shapes and colors. Okay, so that's important because remember Van Gogh, his stuff was just realistic. Okay, but here it looks like O'Keeffe did abstract. And I'm pretty sure we're going to read, but we haven't yet, so we're not going to put it in, that I think some of her stuff was realistic. But here we know it's abstract because we just read it. Okay, here we go. New York. Georgia sent the sketches to a friend who, without Georgia's approval, gave them to a photographer and an art gallery owner named Alfred Stieglitz. Stieglitz loved the drawings and started to display them in his gallery. When Georgia found out, she was not happy. Remember, she's a spitfire of a woman, so you can see her charging in there to talk with this guy, and she confronted Stieglitz. She barreled into the art gallery, prepared to yell at him, but was shocked to find him so handsome. And he thought she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. They worked it out, and she agreed to let him to continue to display her drawings. Ooh. Before long, Stieglitz and Georgia were in love, and they married. Over the next several years, Georgia continued to develop her style. She was influenced by both the city of New York and the landscapes of New Mexico, her second home. She became a famous and popular artist, selling hundreds of works, many which are now displayed in museums throughout the world. So I think we could put on here that she was married. And we already know she had no children. I believe we read that above. Okay, in fact, we could say here for Van Gogh, I guess, you know what, this is going to be a different secondary experience because I'm not sure that we read it, but I will tell you he was not married. And he had no kids. I'm using the word kids. That's a slang term. A kid is actually a young goat. But in America, we call it a kid, a child. So here, she is married, but has no kids. Okay. Paintings of flowers and plants. Some of Georgia's most famous paintings were large-scale impressions of flowers and plants. Remember, she's very large. She rarely signed her work, but sometimes she'd write on the back. The most striking feature of these paintings was the large size of the flower and the vivid colors. Georgia made her paintings large so that people would notice nature's beauty. The smallest of her works are about 4 foot by 5 foot. That's about your size, like topping out. The largest is about 7 foot by 12 feet, and about the size of most people's dining room wall. The picture of the sunrise below takes up an entire stairwell in an art gallery. Can't miss it. So I'm pretty sure at this point you know what to write. Her paintings were large. Okay, and going back here, did we write that his were kind of normal in size? They were like 2 foot by 3 foot. If we didn't, I'm pretty sure in the text it talked about his things being like 2 foot by 3 foot. Like they're medium size. Okay, kind of medium size. Okay, let's keep going. New Mexico. Georgia spent much of her later life in New Mexico. New Mexico is a special place for Georgia. The landscape provided her with inspiration and had significant influence on her art. So that's probably important. We should probably write down New Mexico or out west. She painted impressions of hills, rivers, and cliffs of New Mexico. She enjoyed painting the changing colors of the New Mexican landscape as the light changed throughout the day. Some of her most famous paintings featured the skull bone of a cow, giving her a Western feeling. She painted and traveled all by herself for months at a time. A few weeks out of the year, she would go back to New York and show her work at her husband's gallery. They stayed married, but usually did not live together. Okay, so here's like her cow skull. So she's got kind of a Western United States feel. So we'll put on here New Mexico. New Mexico, West USA. Okay, death and legacy. Georgia O'Keeffe died at the age of 98 on March 6th, 1986 in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Okay, so we go back up here to our notes and say she died in 1986 and she was 98 years old. Whew. That's crazy old. Good for her. Okay. Mrs. Nicholson was alive then. At that point, I was 10 years old. She died of old age, and she maintained an extremely healthy lifestyle. She was 98. Don't know why I said it twice. There we go. Or I didn't write this, so somebody did. Today, she was considered one of the most famous female artists in American history. So I think that's probably important too. So we'll go back and check our notes. So, female artist. Remember that was not super popular at that time, that she was female. We know that this guy, it didn't say that he's a male specifically, but I'm going to write that in there. So these are your your primary resource. This is stuff you did. This is a secondary resource, something you read about. This is secondary resource, something Mrs. Nicholson's telling you. Same thing over here. This is your primary resource. You already did this, so you have hands-on, first-hand knowledge. This is a secondary resource because we read about it. And now we're ready for Seurat. Again, then you continue with us. If it's not helping you, you go ahead and stop watching this video, and you can do this last part on your own. Okay, we're going to finish this out together then, it looks like. So now we're going to read about George Seurat. All right, where did George Seurat grow up? George Seurat was born December 2nd, 1859 in Paris, France. Okay, so let's go on over here to our notes. We're on George Seurat. He was born 1859 in Paris. We know he's going to die eventually, but we don't know when. Okay, so 1859, so he's what, 5 years, 7 years, what was, oh my gosh, Mrs. Nicholson. I'm going from 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 6 years older than Van Gogh. Okay. All right, let's keep going. His parents were very wealthy, allowing him to focus on his art. He was quiet and an intelligent child who kept to himself. George attended the School of Fine Arts in Paris starting in 1878. Okay, so we know that he was rich. Wealthy is a nicer way to put it. Whereas we know, I'm going to put this down here because we didn't read about it so much, but Mrs. Nicholson is telling you that Van Gogh was poor. And O'Keeffe, she was born middle class and pretty much stayed middle class. Meaning that she was kind of like us. She could go to a restaurant, she could get some clothes, she could buy what she needed to, but she wasn't crazy wealthy like Seurat's family was. Oh, and he went to art school, right? Pretty sure Van Gogh did not. It did say that she went to art school. It said to Seurat went to art school. I'm pretty sure he was self-taught. Okay, so here we go. Pointillism. With the help of his parents, remember because they were rich, George set up his own art studio not far from their house. Because his parents supported him financially, George was able to paint and explore any areas of art he chose. He did not feel pressured to paint what would sell in order to get money to live. He could paint whatever he wanted. Painting was more of a hobby for him. Seurat began to explore the science of optics and color. Optics is what you see. He found that rather than mixing the colors of paint on a palette, he could place tiny dots of different colors next to each other on the canvas, and the eye would mix the colors. Today, we call it pointillism. All of his paintings were realistic. You could tell what the subjects were. Whew, that's a lot of stuff there. So, over here, we know he did pointillism. We already wrote it here because you experimented with that. You experienced it, so it's a primary resource. Here, we could say that his paintings were realistic. And you know what? Over here for Georgia O'Keeffe, it said abstract. I guess it would go down here because I'm telling you, but we already know because some of her stuff was realistic. Okay, we saw that with the skull. Okay, going back here, his stuff is always realistic. So here you see his stuff is, Van Gogh is always realistic. Seurat is always realistic, whereas O'Keeffe can be abstract and realistic. Okay, so here we go. Keep going here. Dots. Here's his most famous painting. In 1884, Seurat began to work on his greatest masterpiece. He uses pointillism to paint a huge painting called Sunday Afternoon on the island of Grand Jatte. It is 6 foot 10 inches tall by 10 foot 1 inch wide, but it was painted entirely with small dots of color. This is roughly the size of our windows in the art room, 3 across. This is huge. The painting was so complex it took him 2 years of non-stop work to finish. Each morning he would go to the scene, so that's at this island, and make sketches. Then in the afternoon he would return to his studio to paint until later at night. He kept the painting a secret, not wanting anyone to know what he was doing. Okay, so we've got a lot of stuff to do here. So his most famous painting was huge. Work. Which of these people did huge work? This one, Georgia O'Keeffe. So the work was huge. His most famous painting is called Sunday Afternoon at La Grande, Grandejatte. So, just a backstory. La Grande Jatte was an island, large island. Grande means large. And people at this time, this is like what, 84, okay, when he's painting this. They didn't have TV. They didn't have gaming or anything. So to have fun, people went outside. And so they'd go to this island and just walk around and swim and boat and see people. And that was it. That's what they did for fun. When George Seurat finally exhibited the painting in 1886, people were amazed. Some thought that this new way of painting, the dots, was the wave of future in art. Seurat was now considered one of the leading artists in Paris. He didn't have to be. Remember, he's rich, but it just happened that he was successful. He was good at it. He continued to work. Seurat continued to paint using the pointillism style. He also experimented with lines. He felt that different types of lines could express different types of emotions. He grew to be friends with other artists at the time, including Vincent van Gogh. Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's probably important. So we can say that he was friends with, in medical, if you do medical anything, like licensing or practicing to take notes, the C with the line is with, okay, or you can say friends with Van Gogh. Well, that's cool. That's neat. Okay, so he's friends with Van Gogh. Early death. Something strange about his life was that he had to hide part of his social activities from his family. As he was from the wealthy upper class, he was expected to marry a woman who was also from a wealthy family. In fact, he fell in love with a poor woman. He was not allowed to speak with such people, let alone marry one. So he hid his marriage and their child from his parents. At that time, people were only allowed to socialize with people in the same class. So like rich people talk to rich people, poor people talk to poor people. When George was just 31 years old, he became very sick and he died. He likely died from meningitis, which is a sickness. He died of natural causes. This was on March 29th, 1891. This disease is now cured by antibiotics. His wife and child also died from the same illness. He has no living relatives. Whew, okay, so we have a whole bunch of stuff here. He was 31 when he died. He died 1891. So go over here. He died 1891, and he was 31 years old. And I thought that was interesting. It said he died of natural causes. Remember, he was just sick. Which of these other two died of natural causes? Van Gogh or O'Keeffe? Hopefully you said O'Keeffe. She just died of old age. So that would again be a natural cause of her death. Vincent van Gogh, remember, he did not die of natural causes. He killed himself. Boy, that's terrible handwriting. I meant to say killed. Killed himself. Okay, killed himself. All right. So these two guys died of natural causes, old age and sickness, and Van Gogh did not. Okay, marrying a maid, that may be more of like a fun thing, not as important thing to his life. Legacy. It's okay if you wrote it, but I'm not sure it's super important. Here's more of his paintings. They're all realistic. Okay, Seurat gave the world of art new ideas and concepts in color and how the eye works together with color. His paintings worked a lot like computer monitors work today. His dots were like the pixels on a computer screen, and when they get together, close together, your eye blends them and they form images. Excellent. Hey, guess what, you guys? This was your assignment and you are all done. Bring your sketchbook back to class.